After his wife's death, Max found out that his son was ill. His life was in shambles. But then someone else's tragedy turned into a real miracle for the man. A young man was sitting on a bench near the hospital, clutching his head. He was crying. Having barely come to terms with his wife's death, he now learned that his son was terminally ill. Back then, he didn't know yet that miracles could actually happen. He didn't know that soon his life would change completely, nor did he know that it would happen because of someone else's tragedy. Max didn't believe in mysticism, but after what happened, it was impossible to doubt the existence of otherworldly forces. This incredible story started out beautifully. It began with great and passionate love. Max fell in love with Adeline at first sight. The attractive, sweet, and fragile young woman won over his heart with her open nature and kindness. Max didn't hold off on taking the next step, and just a month later, he proposed to Adeline. He doted on his wife, and when she got pregnant, he was very attentive and took great care of her. The couple spent almost all their free time together. Adeline's husband was her entire world. She lost her parents early in life, so Max was her only family. Max approached the hospital entrance and sat down on a bench. Memories flooded his mind with extra vigor. He saw his smiling wife standing before him. He kissed her round belly and gently whispered, "When you get here, your dad will teach you everything you need to know. We'll play together and take care of your mommy." Adeline stroked her husband's hair and sighed dreamily. The young woman's wish never came true. She never even got to hold on to her son. Adeline died in labor. She never told Max that the doctors advised her against having children. The woman knew how badly her husband dreamed of becoming a father, so she decided to risk it. Max thought back to the time when he picked up his son for the first time, how he bottle-fed him and changed his diapers. He knew perfectly well that his life would never be the same again. Without his beloved wife and with his little son in his care, he'd have to go through many hardships. Moreover, he still needed to work to make sure that Daniel was never in need of anything. As is often the case, the man's mother rushed to help him. Elvira came from another city as soon as she learned of Adeline's passing. She helped with the funeral arrangements and then moved in with Max. There was nothing to prevent her from doing so, since she'd been a widow for a long time. Elvira helped her son pull himself together and encouraged him to go back to work. And she took care of her grandson in the meantime. But misfortunes never come alone. The family was in for a new round of grief. Little Daniel suddenly got a fever. The doctors examined the boy, and both Max and Elvira were shocked to hear the boy get diagnosed with a terminal disease. Max sat on a bench near the hospital and thought, "Why him? Why not me? He's just a little kid. God, if you hear me, tell me, why do you need another angel? You took Adeline away from me. I'm begging you, take me. Let me get sick, but please, let my kid live. His life has just started. What do I need to do to save Daniel? Please help me." Holding his head in his hands, the man was barely holding back his tears. But then he felt a soft touch on his hand. Max shook off his sad thoughts and looked to see who had disturbed his peace. There was a dog standing near him. He had a strange, as if human, eyes. He's been sitting near the hospital for 2 days now. When his owner was brought in, he came running after the ambulance, said the young nurse who was passing by. The woman got in an accident and died in the hospital, but her loyal dog is still waiting for her. We don't even know the woman's name. She was never reported as a missing person to the police. She sat down by the bench and gently stroked the dog. He refuses to eat. He probably feels that his owner won't be coming back, the woman continued. Who do you have at the hospital? My son, Daniel, Max answered. I know your boy. He often asks me to play with him. Sometimes I look after him when your mom needs to step away. Don't worry. I know it's hard, but you have to believe that a miracle will happen. The nurse left and Max looked at the dog for a long time. He was lying by the bench with eyes full of sadness. Don't worry, buddy. You and I are both miserable. So what do you say? Should I bring you a treat tomorrow? Max went to see his son and mother. The news was disappointing. Daniel was getting worse every day. Max picked up his son and took him to the window, barely keeping it together enough not to burn into tears. Dad, there's a dog. I want a dog. Look at him. Home, take him home, the son was babbling, pointing with his finger to the street. Max looked out the window and saw the same dog, but he couldn't take the dog home. The animal needed care, and the man had no time for that. Max went home upset. He couldn't even eat. He simply couldn't force any food down his throat. Exhausted from work and his visits to the hospital, he fell asleep without even undressing. He had a strange dream that night. He saw a fair-haired woman. There was a dog behind her, the same one he saw at the hospital. The stranger approached him and looked sadly into his eyes. It was a mystical sight. She said sadly, "Help," and a red-haired girl with cornflower blue eyes appeared next to her. Max woke up. He couldn't understand what the dream meant, but he was confident that the dog knew the answer and that the woman from the dream was the dog's owner, who died in an accident. After work, the man rushed to the hospital again. He brought food for his son and mother and spent some time with them. "Son, why do you always bring so much food? We can't eat it all." "Just share it with others. You and Daniel are in the hospital. I'm at work. There has to be at least something I can do for you." "Okay, we'll share the fruit with Susanna," Elvira answered. "Susanna? Who's she?" Max asked, rocking Daniel in his arms. "She's our nurse. She's very sweet and kind. Daniel loves her very much. She plays with him often, and here she is," Max's mother smiled. A young woman came into the room. It was the same nurse who told Max about the dog's owner the day before. "Hello," she smiled and seemed to illuminate the entire room with her energy. Daniel smiled back at her and held out his hands to Susanna. She walked over to Max and took the boy from his arms. "Did you find out anything about the woman from that accident?" Max asked timidly. "No, unfortunately, and the police are in no hurry to do anything about it. She's in the morgue waiting to be identified. She deserves a proper funeral, like everyone else," the woman answered. "I'll try to help. I'll see who's in charge of this case. I also work for the police." When Max left the hospital, he saw the dog again. "Are you still waiting? You won't leave, will you?" the man asked and gave the dog some food, which he'd put in his pocket beforehand. He casually licked the food off of Max's palm. The man was about to leave when the dog grabbed his sleeve carefully with his teeth and started pulling him somewhere. "Well, what do you want?" "Do you want to show me something?" Max smiled, surprised at the dog's determination. The man decided to follow the dog. The place where the dog took him turned out to be a few blocks away from the hospital. It was a small house behind the park. Max thought for a while whether he should knock on the door or not, but the dog looked at him so plaintively that it was impossible for him to back down now. The door was opened by a 9-year-old girl. She had red hair and blue eyes. It was the child from Max's dream. "Did something happen to Mommy? She took Archie for a walk a few days ago and still hasn't come back." The girl looked at him intently. Then the dog ran up to the girl and started licking her, and she stroked him back and affectionately called him Archie. Max couldn't say a word at first. He was shocked that mystical dream turned out to be true. The restless soul of the dead woman asked him to help her daughter. But how could he tell the girl that her mother was dead? The girl's name was Elizabeth. The poor thing started sobbing when the man tried to explain that her mother became an angel and now lived in heaven. Max had tears in his eyes. "Why did my mom leave me? How am I supposed to live without her? Will I be on my own now?" Elizabeth had no one else. Her father died when she was little, and she didn't have any grandparents or other relatives. Max didn't know what to do. What was he supposed to do with the child and the dog? "Are you my mother's friend? You won't leave me, will you? I don't want to go to an orphanage." Elizabeth was getting anxious. The only solution that Max could come up with was to take Elizabeth and Archie home with him for the time being. And then he'd have time to think and figure out what was the right thing to do. He needed to talk to his mother. At home, he made dinner for Elizabeth and fed the dog. Then he talked to the girl for a long time. trying to explain what happened in a fatherly manner, telling her that bad things sometimes happened in life. The girl seemed to have calmed down and fell asleep, and he continued to stroke her head, worrying that she could wake up and start crying again. That night, Elizabeth's mother came to him in a dream again, but only for a short time. She just smiled and whispered, "You'll be fine now. I'll take care of it." The next day, he went to the hospital. He left Elizabeth at home and told her not to go anywhere, to have breakfast, watch TV, and wait for him. "And you keep an eye out on Elizabeth," he looked sternly at Archie. "You're responsible for her now. You don't need to come with me." At the hospital, Max told his mother and Susanna about everything that happened. "You see, I promised that I would help," he said to the nurse. "Now I have to make arrangements for the girl's mother's funeral." Meanwhile, Elvira and Susanna told him the amazing news. His beloved son was feeling better. The attending physician shrugged his shoulders and couldn't understand what was happening. The boy's test results showed that Daniel was on the mend. "This is impossible. It's a real miracle," the doctor said. "I've never seen anything like this." Daniel smiled, running around the room. Then he sat down next to Max and said, "A woman came to visit me today. She was wearing a white dress and looked like an angel. She hugged me and said that I would go home soon. Dad, am I going home?" "Of course you are, son." Max hugged him. He understood that it was some kind of mysticism, something otherworldly, something that couldn't really be explained. The man felt that Elizabeth's deceased mother was responsible for Daniel's recovery. He had to help the girl. He couldn't let her end up in an orphanage. "Mom, I'm going to adopt this girl," Max said confidently. "It won't be easy, son. You're a single father. They won't let you get custody of her," Elvira explained. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but your mom is right," Susanna said as she played with Daniel. "So what am I supposed to do now?" Max hesitated. "You need to get married." "How can I get married? It's only been 3 years since Adeline died. I can't just remarry." "Max, life goes on. I won't be able to help you forever. If you really want to adopt Elizabeth, you should think about a fake marriage at least." "And who would dare to fake marry me? Who'd want to be responsible for someone else's children?" Max laughed nervously. "I can help you. Your mother told me a lot about you. You're a decent man, and I want to help you and the kids," he heard Susanna's voice. Max made the funeral arrangements for Julia, Elizabeth's mother. Together with Susanna, they helped the girl say goodbye to her mother. Mommy, why are you leaving me? How am I supposed to live without you?" Elizabeth screamed. Susanna and Max comforted her as best they could, while Archie whined plaintively by the grave. "Don't leave us, please." The girl looked at them with eyes full of tears. "I saw my mom in a dream. She said that you won't abandon us." "We won't," Max and Susanna answered simultaneously. Daniel made a full recovery and got to go home a month later. Max and Susanna got married. Max saw how great the woman was with the kids and noted how wonderfully she dealt with all the housework. Soon he realized that he'd fallen in love with Susanna. As it turned out, she reciprocated his feelings. Their fake marriage turned into true love and a strong family. Elizabeth and Daniel became very close friends, like a real brother and sister, while their loyal protector Archie was always nearby. Max's mother realized that he no longer needed her help. Moreover, she met a nice man at the hospital and started a relationship with him. Life is unpredictable. After so many misfortunes, everyone in this story found true happiness. Life is like a boomerang, where good is always rewarded.